I just bought a Forsun FS 1325 CNC. Just a tip that if you don't have a forklift at your location, be sure to have a flatbed truck with a forklift deliver it to your door. Using a box truck and lift is not advisable. Pop the lid of the crate using a crowbar. So this is the Forsun FS 1325 with a 300mm rotary which mounts to the side. It can take a little while to remove all the plastic wrap, crank up some music and enjoy the experience. No need to rush. I rented the material handler from a big box store. Cost me about $100 per day, but it made it possible for me to do this. This rotary is extremely heavy, and most of the weight is at the end with the motor. I used a strap to keep the motor from rolling off the handler. Go slow, see if you can get a friend to help. I definitely recommend putting the feet on first, then use a metal bar or a 4x4 as a lever for turning this thing upright. Now this next part is a bit tricky. Getting it off the pallet took some effort with a circular saw, the jack, and a material handler. Once I figured out a method, it didn't take much time. Using a forklift, although, would have been much smarter. Now for the hard part. Gotta move this gantry and get it turned upright. This is definitely not the best way to do this, but when you don't have a forklift or a heavy-duty gantry in your shop, this works. You can see I needed to get it up high off the table, so I brought in some concrete blocks I had lying around in order to elevate it. Getting it turned onto its legs safely was a big concern. Slide the gantry on the handler. This is where using the concrete blocks paid off. I was able to slide it far enough to get it onto the material handler and then strap it tight. When trying to lift and move the gantry, I went really slow, and I was just cautious in order not to tip the material handler. Make sure you've already removed the screws from the sliders on the rails. To lower the gantry into position, you need to remove the stepper motors and gear. If you remove the sliders from the rails, you're in for a big disappointment. You'll spill all of the bearings, then you'll need to purchase some new sliders. No worries though, they're cheap. You can find them on Amazon in case you make the same mistake that this genius did. Once you have the gantry lowered onto the sliders and aligned, put the screws back in and secure them. Then remount the gear and stepper motors. Yes, this does mean that you need to take off the metal cover for the stepper motors and later put them back on, but it's pretty easy to do. So now would be a good time to take just a few moments to clean up the shop. That way, it'll be a lot easier to install the rest of the components. It's time to pay attention here because this machine is wired for single-phase 240-volt 20-amp circuits. In the USA, we have 2 hots and a ground. This CNC is made in China and wired with 1 hot and 1 neutral. We checked with the engineer at Forsun and he verified that with USA 2-phase, we can simply connect leg 1 to L1 on the machine connection and leg 2 to neutral. This will work. Be sure to connect to the proper ground spot in the control panel cabinet. The machine powered up just fine. The slide rails went on easy. It took some patience with getting the screws to bite, and there were a few missing from shipping. Putting on the dust covers was also an easy job. However, some of the drill holes were slightly off. I just left off a couple screws instead of forcing them. It won't make any difference in the operation of the machine. So attaching the cable track was a bit of a challenge considering there were no apparent screw holes for connecting it. I decided to make my own. I drilled and tapped new holes in a convenient spot that works. Yes, I had to make my 100th run to the local big box store to get a tap. So now would be a good time to take just a few moments to clean up the shop. Just too much stuff in the way, so I cleaned up as much as I could before leveling. Now I need to move the rotary into position. I really thought this would be a lot harder than it turned out to be. The rotary was actually really easy to get into position. Leveling it was a little more work though. Be sure to level the table first and then the rotary before you attach it. Doing it this way makes it a lot easier to align the screw holes for the rotary. Connect the stepper motor and cables for the rotary. Simply look at the ends of the connections and it'll be clear what goes where. Time for a little victory dance.